Hello everyone, Professor Toybox here along with Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey, and we're back in my Fantasia toy box for our next episode of Toybox Tutorials. We're working on a side quest for Mickey to recover a scroll that the demon Chernabog here stole from the magician's castle. Chernabog is using his power to try to break a protective spell that was cast on that scroll and unlock its secrets. And if Mickey tries to pick it up right now, the lightning and sparks will kill him because we've hooked up a kill switch to that. So he needs to battle Chernabog to defeat him before he can safely recover the scroll. And we started working on this battle last time. We placed our Chernabog townsperson up here on top of this tower. And as we talked about last time, there's nothing to prevent Mickey from picking him up and drop kicking him off the cliff. And so we used the scalable barrier block to put a protective barrier around him and make it a little bit more challenging, and also around the cliff there. And that way Mickey needs to do something in order to remove that barrier. The problem is, the way we positioned this barrier last time and the way we placed it, there's no way to actually remove it. We put this down just doing the normal thing that we do with building pieces. And unfortunately, there's no property on the scalable barrier block that turns it on or off. There's no logic connection that you can establish that would deactivate it like you can a trigger area. And I don't really want the player to have the magic wand in here as they're playing, because they can delete not just that scalable barrier block, but Chernabog himself, or just about anything that they probably shouldn't delete. And so we don't want the players to have access to that. So we need a way to add and remove that scalable barrier block dynamically. And fortunately, there's a way to do that, and that is to use a replayer. And that's our topic for today's lesson. So you'll find that toy in the Creativitoys drawer. And I'm going to drop one right over here and place it on the ground like so. The replayer is one of the most powerful toys available in the toy box. You can use it to record your actions in the toy box editor, such as building things. It'll remember the buildings and the pieces that you used, the order in which you placed them, and where you put them. Then you can play it back at any time or clear it to add and remove your recorded creations dynamically. With the replayer, you can push a button and have a bridge appear, or you can plant a bomb next to a building and destroy the building by making it disappear. There's so many possibilities that this toy provides for you. It's very powerful. So as we start to look at this, we'll open the logic menu for it, and you'll notice there's logic connections you can establish and properties. And there's one property here, the playback interval, and this is the amount of time that it will put in between placing each piece down that you've recorded. And so I usually like to set this at 0 so that all of the pieces show up pretty much simultaneously, or at least very, very quickly. You can have a second in between them, or 2 seconds, or however long you want, however much you want to draw out the playback process. And I'll hit the back arrow. There's also a number of trigger signals that this toy broadcasts. So you can have it broadcast 6 different signals when the recording is started or stopped, when you clear the replayer, and clearing it just erases anything that it's put down. It doesn't actually remove anything out of the replayer. It's recording what it recorded is still there. It just takes the toys out of your toy box world. Playback puts them back into your world. You can reverse playback, so once you've done playback, you can actually back them out in the opposite order of which you replaced them, and it takes them out of the toy box. Kind of like clear, except clear does it instantaneously. And then there's a reset, and this will delete the recording inside of the replayer, and so you'll have to record something new, because when you play back, nothing will happen. And so those are the 6 trigger signals that this toy broadcasts. And you can also hook up a button to make it do those 6 things as well. So to use this toy, we'll come out here and exit the editor. And you can just walk up and stand on top of this. And it opens a little menu in the lower right corner. And on my Wii U, the B key at the bottom starts the recording and stops it once it starts recording. A will clear it, Y will play it back, and X will rewind, or essentially play back in reverse. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit B to start recording. And I can't actually get back into the editor while I'm standing on this because the little menu there in the lower right corner prevents me from doing that. So I need to step off of the replayer, and now I can get back into the editor. And we can come over here to the platforming toys, back to our scalable barrier block. And I'm actually going to put this down again. I forgot to take the other one out first. So we'll go ahead and place that. And it'll also remember when we resize this, which is a good thing. So I can put this down here and resize it. And it'll remember where we put it and what size it was. And I could put down more things if I wanted. But for right now, that's all I need this toy to do. And so we'll come back out of the editor. And then we'll step on this toy one more time, and I'll hit B to stop recording, and then I can press A to clear it. And you want to be very careful that you don't press A more than once. That will actually corrupt it. The replayer is a very powerful tool, but very buggy, and I'll talk about some of the limitations of that in a moment. But right now I want to come up here and delete the scalable barrier block that I had from before. So now you can see it's gone. That's the one we put down in our last video. And so if I come back over here to the replayer, and we'll step on it, and I'll hit Y to play it back. And again, be careful to only touch that one time. And I'll step off, and then we'll come back into the editor mode, into Spark mode, and that barrier block should be back. And it is. So that's really good. So now I have a way to put that block back, take it back out, and do that at will. I'll come over here and go ahead and take that out for now. So I'll press A to clear it and step off. So now we've got Chernabog, and he's protected by a scalable barrier block that we can remove. The question now is, how's Mickey going to do that? Well, in the Fantasia movie, the demon Chernabog is a creature of the night. His only weakness appears to be daylight. When dawn begins to break, he curls up beneath his wings on top of the mountain and waits for nightfall. So I thought it'd be appropriate for Mickey to cast a daylight spell to weaken Chernabog, and that would remove the protective barrier. Then Mickey can climb up the tower and confront him. And so in order to do that, right now he needs to be in a position where the player can see the spell. And we can climb up here, but unless the player turns the camera upward, he's never going to see when it gets cast. And so I want to get Mickey up about level to where that is. So we're going to put in a few more little terrain blocks here. And I'm going to come down to Building Sets Group 1, and we're going to connect a bridge over here to the top of this, about like that. And then another one here, and we'll put down a couple of blocks below that. So it looks like that bridge connects and rests on top of that. And that'll get Mickey up to the top there, almost level with where Chernabog is. And so if we come over here and drop Mickey down on this, even if the camera is not facing toward the tower, and I start running and I start going up this bridge, you'll notice the camera automatically swings around and points me in that direction. So that's really good. So now I'm facing that way. And what I'd like to do is when Mickey steps up here on top of this little platform, he'll automatically cast the spell. And I would have loved to have had something in the Action Enforcer that showed him casting a spell, but since we don't have that, what we'll do instead is put a trigger up here on top of this little block. So I'm going to come over to our toys, to this trigger. And so when Mickey steps off this bridge, he'll step onto this trigger, and that will trigger the spell. And for that, we're going to need an effects generator. So you'll get to see us use this again. We used this a few weeks ago, but we'll do something a little different with it this time. So we're going to connect this one up to the locator that we use up here on top of the tower to put Chernabog in here. And let's see, are we connected to the locator? Yes. There we go. And now we'll come to the trigger. And so a new logic connection on the trigger when it's stepped on by player Annie. I want to cast that light spell, and actually we should probably, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. We should probably use a logic gate here because we don't want this to happen every time we walk up here, just when this side quest is active. So I'm going to put this little gate down. And I'm going to set this up so that when we enter the level, that logic gate will be closed. So we'll come over to the level starter and do a new logic connection on Catalyze. And there's a lot we're setting up here today, but I want to make sure we get all this done in one so that you can see everything we're going to do with this replayer. So on the logic gate, we'll make sure that's closed when we come into the toy box. And then on our mission giver over here, when we accept his mission, on the text displayer for that, we'll do a new logic connection when the text proposal is accepted. We'll come over and open this logic gate back up. And now we'll come up here to our trigger and do a new logic connection when stepped on by player Annie. We'll come over to this logic gate and input into the gate. And unless that gate is open, the signal won't go any further. But if this quest is active, then we'll do a new logic connection off the logic gate on output. Come over to our new effects generator, and we're going to play one time underneath, let's see, light beams. We're going to do a heavenly light beacon. And that logic gate is open by default, so I should be able to come up here and just step on that, and we can see how that looks. Make sure that's the effect that we want. And you can see there's some light up there now that's going to be shining down on him. And then the effect goes away. So that's good. That's the effect that I want. And ideally, what we should do then is on the effects generator, a new logic connection. When that's triggered, turn around and close this gate so we can't do that more than one time. All right, so that will go ahead and start the effect, which is a good thing. And the other thing we want, the whole purpose of this, is to remove that scalable barrier block that's protecting Chernabog. And so what we'll do is come over to, probably not here, probably the logic gate would be the place to go. And do a new logic connection on output. And we'll come over to our replayer and clear it. And that will remove the scalable barrier block. And by the way, we need to put that block down. So again, we'll come over to our mission giver. And when we start the mission, we'll make sure we do a playback on that replayer. So when text proposal is accepted, not only will we start the effects generators over here for the lightning and the sparks, and kick off the friend generator to put Chernabog up there on the tower, but we'll come over to our replayer and do a playback. And that will put the block up there. So let's come back over here to our reset button. And we'll go ahead and hit the button, which turns off everything over there and reactivates our mission giver. And we can test out what we've got. Okay, so Mickey comes up onto the tower and we approach our mission giver and we accept the mission. And now the lightning effects are going over there and the sparks. Mickey hops on his horse, rides on over, and when he gets here, he finds that the lightning effects are going on that thing, and if he tries to grab it, he dies, as we've seen in previous videos. If he climbs the tower, he finds Chernabog up here, and he's protected by that scalable barrier block, so that's no good. But we'll hook up a radar marker over here a little later on to direct him up to this point. And so if we come up over here, Mickey will run up to the top of the peak over here and cast the light spell. And now if we run on up to the top of the tower and climb up there, you'll notice that protective barrier is gone. So now we can get to Chernabog, and we can pick him up and do something with him. So there we are, the first phase of the battle against Chernabog is done, and I think we've done our best to make this little town person in a Chernabog costume seem more threatening than he looks. We can see his power on display with the lightning effects over there. He's protected by an impenetrable energy barrier if we climb the tower and try to get to him. But Mickey can climb the neighboring peak and cast a daylight spell that weakens Chernabog and removes the protective barrier. So now that Mickey can get to Chernabog, he needs a way to defeat him in order to stop the lightning effects and recover the scroll. And we'll work on that next time as we finally wrap up this side quest. Before we go, though, I mentioned that there are some limitations with this replayer, and I want to make sure I cover those. I talked about these a lot in my Random Dungeons series where we use the replayer extensively, but just to kind of recap, so you don't have to watch through that entire series to collect these little tidbits. As I mentioned, this is a very powerful but buggy tool. There seems to be some limited memory or resources associated with it, so you can use a single replayer and put down a lot of blocks, and that seems to work okay. But if you want to use multiple replayers, you want to limit the number of pieces that you put down with that. And I've found that I can use about 15 to 20 replayers if I'm only placing a half a dozen pieces or less with each one. That seems to be okay. If I start trying to put down 30, 40, 50 pieces with each replayer, I'll be lucky if I can use one or two before I run into the memory limitation problems that it seems to have. And you'll know when you run into those, because when you try to replay the replayer and play it back, the pieces will either not come back, or they'll be in the wrong place, or they'll be the wrong piece. It's pretty easy to corrupt the replayers if you use too much memory for those, so be careful how many pieces you put down with them. Second, the replayer doesn't remember logic connections, and it doesn't remember style changes. So if you want to have that put down a terrain block, you want to make sure that you come in and set the default style for that. So if we come in here, for example, and hit the X, you want to make sure that you select the style that you want and set that to be your theme, so that you don't have to change the theme of the pieces after you put them down, because the replayer will not remember that. And that's true for the terrain, that's true for the building blocks, that's true for the first 9 pieces here in the plants drawer that you can customize. You want to make sure you set those to the textures that you want before you start recording. As I mentioned before, you don't want to clear twice in a row or try to clear a replayer that hasn't been played. That will corrupt the replayers as well, and not necessarily even the replayer that you're working with. It can affect other replayers too. And another thing you want to make sure you don't do is use the undo feature. So if you're recording, on my Wii U, if you look at the menu at the bottom, there's an X that I can press to undo the last piece that I put down. Don't do that while you're recording, because that will likely corrupt the replayer as well. You want to make sure to avoid that. And so that's it for replayers. As I said, it's a pretty powerful tool. It's kind of buggy, but if you're careful how you use it and avoid those limitations that I just mentioned, you should be all right. So next time, we'll wrap up this side quest and then move on to something new. Meanwhile, I hope you've enjoyed this video, or at least found it helpful. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to sign up on my blog or subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the next episode in this series. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.